Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ricky Steenkamp. I am a project manager at Macmillan Teacher Campus. We at Macmillan Teacher Campus are very happy to have you in this session this afternoon. This is our second workshop or webinar on the new coding and robotics curriculum for foundation phase teachers. And before we begin, just a few administrative procedures. The system automatically generates an attendee report, so there won't be one that you need to complete for us for this session, so don't worry about that too much. All participants that are in the session this afternoon will receive a certificate of attendance in about 2 weeks' time. So please look out for an email from Salome with your certificate attached. Now, in order for you to claim PD points for this session, you need to hop onto the SACE website and log this as a self-directed activity, and you use your certificate that you've received as evidence of attendance. And the system will keep everyone muted at all times, so you won't be able to unmute yourself. But please take a look. I've enabled the Q&A section, and I've also enabled the chat. So you are more than welcome to communicate with us via those two platforms. So if you have a question to ask or you want to make a comment, you could also pop them in there, but you can also use the raise hand if you want to ask a question, or you can use the react button if there's something particularly that you like, or that you, if you've been asked to react via that method. So we hope you enjoy the session with us this afternoon. Our trainer is no stranger to everyone. Karen Walstra has dedicated her career to researching, training, and teaching technology, ICT integration, and coding and robotics. And she's very, very passionate about it. So as you will most likely realize once she begins her session. Karen, thank you so much for making time available out of your very busy schedule to present the session for us. And no doubt the participants are going to enjoy every single minute of it. So I'm going to hand over straight to you. Enjoy, everyone.
So hello, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at logical and critical thinking, and we're going to look at it in terms of the coding and robotics curriculum. So when we look at the curriculum house, as I call it, you'll see that at the top, it talks about 21st century skills. And these are communication, collaboration, creativity, and perseverance. I really, truly believe that all of these skills need to be taught to our children. Perseverance, particularly in what we are seeing at the moment in terms of children being on devices all the time and really not wanting to try if they don't get things right. Then we've got the coding curriculum, and that looks at computational thinking. But a cool thing they've added is debugging. And then the robotics, which looks at inspiration, ideation, and implementation, which is other words or similar words for the design thinking process. But all of these aspects of the curriculum are described as solution development aspects. And then another part, which I think is really important, is digital concepts. So digital citizenship, digital awareness, and digital skills. And these three areas are our content knowledge that the learners will learn as they're working through the curriculum. And then there are three skill development areas. There's design thinking, there's logical and critical thinking, and there's computational thinking within the space. And all of these interrelate together and work together to really achieve and get the students to be working, and are seen as problem-solving tasks and situations that the children will work through. If you haven't looked at the curriculum, download it from the website and really go and see what it looks like. So for me, it's really important within the space, and it's related in the curriculum that it talks about that we should introduce our children to STEAM. Some of you might know it as STEM. So it's your science area, your technology area, your engineering. A is for the arts and M is for mathematics. And this goes across the coding and robotics curriculum. So think about how you could incorporate all of these aspects of knowledge when you're teaching as well. So within the communication aspect, if we think about it, we want to get our learners to really think. We want them to communicate their ideas, and we want to create a safe classroom space where everyone feels welcome and comfortable to speak. If we then move on from that, we're also wanting to say that it's not just the teacher asking the questions. It's vitally important that you get your children to be asking questions as part of the communication skills. So in all our teachers, we need to ask questions carefully and encourage our children to ask questions. If we then look at collaboration, we want to encourage the discussion among learners. So that again is communication. We want to get the learners to work in groups and to share ideas with each other. We want to promote respect for each other and respect for the opinions of others. It's very important that we teach children to listen to other people's views, even if we don't agree with each other. And with all of this, we again want to emphasize the questioning, both of the learners and in how they ask the questions, and not just yourselves. From a creativity point of view, we want to inspire and promote creativity in a manner in which that you create your lessons. Make the children want to learn, get them to be excited about the topics that you're working on. Encourage the learners to come up with their own solutions to solve the problems. Don't give them the solutions, give them the knowledge and let them come up with things that will work and solve the problem that you've put them in, and really spark their creativity. And encourage them to ask those questions. And when you ask the questions, think really thoughtfully about how you are asking the questions to encourage the creativity, to encourage the collaboration and the communication. And then lastly, looking at perseverance. For me, perseverance is something which we see the children find really difficult to do. So teaching them to be perseverant is exceptionally important. So getting the learners to realize that it's okay to fail and to get things wrong. We live in a society where if you get good marks and you pass well, you're rewarded. But we often forget to reward those who get things wrong often and then get them right. And you know, if you've done any form of coding, that often the first time or the second time or even the third time it doesn't work. You've got to persevere to get it to work. And so teaching children to be perseverant is very important. You need to provide a space where they feel comfortable, that they're able to reflect on what they've done, that they feel comfortable in fixing it up and trying again, that they're not going to be judged or belittled or made to feel small. And so for me, that's the kind of space that you want, a space where they feel safe, a space where they feel that they can be themselves and really learn from in that. And so through that, really develop their perseverance. For me, I really believe this. It's okay to fail. It's not, and to get things wrong. It's not okay to give up. We need to try and try again. And so we really need to encourage the learners to do that. I'll tell you a little story about myself. I could actually only learn to read when I was in standard 3, grade 5. Before then, I couldn't really read. I'm dyslexic. I'm left-handed. I'm all the things that the teachers moaned about. I would probably been diagnosed with ADHD as well, because I can't sit still and I'm really always fidgety. And yet my mother and father always encouraged me just to try and just to go at it again, and that there was nothing wrong with getting it wrong in the first place. So teaching children not to give up is really, really important. Allowing children to ask questions if they're not sure helps to break that down. And you as the teachers create that space in your classroom. You are the ones that really get it to be meaningful. So if we look at today, what we're going to focus on is logical and critical thinking. And so let's explore some ideas around that. So we're going to begin off by looking at logical thinking. Logical thinking in children is, first of all, we want their ability to reason. We want them to make sense of things. And we want them to solve problems using a really systematic approach. So, for example, they might do things like recognizing patterns or making connections or drawing conclusions based on the evidence that they've seen. So we want them to develop we want them to develop logical thinking. It's really, really important from an academic point of view, and as well as from a problem-solving point of view in all of our everyday situations. Think of all the instances where you have to sort out a problem that's come up, and you're using your logical thinking to do that. So if we look at Piaget's stages of cognitive development, our first one is sensory motor, and it's children who are birthed to 2 years old. Then we've got the pre-operational stage, which are your children from 2 to about 7. And then we've got the concrete operational stage, which are your children from 7 to 11. And then we've got the formal operational stage, which are children from 12 and up. And now if we're looking at logical thinking, children are only really able to apply logical thinking, but from a concrete point of view in the pre-operational stage. Doing abstract concepts of logic is still really difficult for the children to do. So that would be your 7 to 11-year-olds where it's beginning to develop there. So what we're looking at in the foundation phase is real concrete examples of logical thinking. So let's have a look at logical thinking in terms of computational thinking skills. So if we think about problem solving, what we need to do is logically identify and describe the problem. The children need to look at the problem and think about what they've seen and work out what it is. From a decomposition point of view, they need to logically organize and analyze the data into smaller parts. So again, really thinking logically in terms of how do we break this down in terms of what they've been given. From a pattern recognition point of view, they will logically look for the similarities among and within the problems. So teaching them to understand, finding the pattern and where it is and how it works within that space. From an abstraction point of view, they need to logically identify and represent the essential features without including background details. So being able to logically pull out what's really, really important and essential to be able to improve a product or solve the problem of a product. And then from an algorithm design point of view, they need to logically develop their step-by-step instructions for solving problems or carrying out tasks. So many of you know what computational thinking is, and perhaps you hadn't thought about it in terms of logical thinking, but you can see how logical thinking fits so beautifully into the tasks and the activities you do from a computational thinking point of view. So let's look at this from a decomposition point of view. So if we look at this little car, how many circles, how many triangles, and how many rectangles are there? Perhaps you quickly want to write it into the chat. And you could just put a C and a number and a T and a number and an R and a number for circle, triangle, and rectangle. I'm going to only give you about a minute to do this. And then please pop it in the chat. I'm looking in the chat, not in the Q&A for your responses. Seat 5. Nice, thank you. Anybody else? Thanks for the responses. So let's have a look. So we've got 5 circles. We've got the inner circle, the outer circle, and the yellow circle. But what I do want to make you aware of is, can you see that there's a blue line and a black line there? If your children start saying, well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4 again, and 2 there, have the discussion with them. If you really don't want that kind of confusion, then what you should do is not have different colored outlines. But one little soul might see that differently. So remember to be aware of that and how you've put the picture together. And yes, there are no triangles in the picture. And then yes, there are 3 rectangles. But again, the borders are different colors. So if somebody sees those as 2, have the discussion as to yes, there are, and what you were looking for and explaining, and listen to their ideas. Thanks for participating. So we need to make our learners think when we're doing these types of activities. We don't just want them to guess. Then we might look at simple sequencing for our learners, where you give them a number and a shape, and they've now got to combine these and actually put it together. So taking it and saying, how do we take this complex space and actually put it together? Or what about getting them to know a concept and making a decision? So here we've got 4 different numbers. Which one does not belong? Write the number in the chat and why it doesn't belong. Which number doesn't belong and why doesn't it belong? Ah, thanks to those of you who've participated as well. Really appreciate it. Nice, 28 and it's even. Great. Anybody else? Thanks, everyone. So again, getting the children to think about how they could be identifying it and describing it and talking about it. So again, you're pulling in communication, you're pulling in critical thinking, you're pulling in logical thinking, and getting the children really to think. So yes, 28, and it's the only even number between all the different numbers. Thanks for sharing. So if we now use it for solving a problem, so have a look at this picture. What is this person doing? Do you want to pop it into the chat? What is this person doing? Nice, Alison. That's a brilliant answer. 31 is the only one with 10. Yes, thank you. They're reading. They're reading Braille. Yes. So what is the problem? The problem perhaps is that they're understanding Braille. So Braille is a set of instructions which are set on little 6-block dots. So if you look at them, you'll see that there's a space. So you can see like a Q has got 3 dots on the one side, the W's got 3 dots on the right side. And so there's a pattern of 6. There are 6 spaces, and depending on where it is within the space, it shapes the letter. So what I want you to do is look at this little word and say, what word is this? What word is this? Solve the problem. Doing Braille with little children is fantastic. They absolutely love it. Thanks, Daniela. So getting the children to really explore and play. When I used to teach design and technology, we actually got the children to make their own Braille little cards, and they would do it the right way around, and then they would turn it over, and then they would impression it so that it was the right way for a person to read on the other side. And it was brilliant to get them to read somebody else's name or their own name. So yes, it's cat. So there's the C with the 2 dots, there's the A with the 1 on the left, and here's the T with the 2 different symbols. It can be a fun way for your children to engage, and another thing to get them to problem solve. Also invite the Braille Society to your school. They're really brilliant if they come. They often bring blind dogs for the blind as well, that the children can learn about that as well. Just on another note. So let's think about logical thinking in understanding the world around us. One thing that we really have around the world are many different cultures and many different foods. And you could really have wonderful discussions around this related to your life skills topics. So if you look at all these different kinds of examples of different kinds of food and how they would engage with them and what they are, perhaps you have a tasting day and really get them to explore what the different foods are. But if you start thinking about understanding the world, just think about almost every topic that you do within your life skills and how you could be getting the children to engage and interact and really explore them, understanding it from a natural point of view or a cultural point of view, including history, and then looking at the sciences and the human body and the solar system and your machines in terms of your robotics and things like that, but also look at machines that are used in the other areas as well. And then what about your built environment or your towns and your structures and transportation? So getting the children to really build these things, work with them, understand how they fit together, can really get us to be thinking logically and how we engage with each other from that point of view. So we need to have discussions. We need to encourage exploration. We really want to grow their general knowledge and get them to think about the things around them and be able to have discussions about that as well. Oh, I think I've gone the wrong way. No, I haven't. Then let's think about critical thinking. So from a critical thinking point of view, we need to think about how do we get the children to analyze information? How do we get children to make decisions? How do we get children to reason? What about getting them to really solve problems? And getting them to evaluate things is also very, very important. So one thing that you do quite often in terms of coding robotics, and that you used to do in terms of technology, was getting them to identify problems. So have a look at this picture. What do you think this picture might be? So what do you see might be a question, or what is the problem, or what must be solved? And then get your children to put their ideas down. So maybe you want to write some ideas down about what are you actually seeing? And then from what you're seeing, what is the problem? And then if you look at that, what are the kinds of solutions that the children could come up with? So again, this relates to understanding the world around us, the things that we see, and taking a picture that has a huge amount of impact on this bird and other creatures, and saying, let's have a discussion. So what are your thoughts around that? What do you see? What is the problem? And what must be solved? I'd love to see your thoughts. I'll give you a minute or two. Imagine that poor seagull. And what would happen if he eats that? Gull with rubbish? Thanks, Anne. Yes. Yes. Yes, nice. Thank you for the comments that you're all popping in. This was really cool. So when you're getting children to solve problems, you don't necessarily have to have something that's really complex or difficult. Think about the topic that you're doing in life skills and go and find pictures around it, perhaps controversial pictures or pictures that will get the children chatting and thinking, a bit like the seagull with the litter in it, and get them to be aware of it and have the discussions. And you can be building a range of different skills by getting them to do that. Ah, thanks, Hazel. So really getting the children to think about how this can really impact the environment, and then talk about what could be done to solve it. Is it that they could actually write a letter to somebody? Is it, if they live on the coast, is it something that they could do? Is it something the school could do? Is it creating an awareness? But get the little children even to begin thinking about what are the kinds of things they could do to solve these kinds of problems. Really, thank you for your thinking and participating. What about if you're looking at coding? You're really getting the children to solve the problems as well. So if you said that there's only one arrow per block and that they're not using turning arrows yet, they're just using straight arrows. And then you said to them, okay, so here's a lot of code. Is this code correct? Getting them to solve the problem, getting them to see, is it accurate? Is it right? Getting them to understand the arrows. You're now combining your critical thinking and your logical thinking to come up with the solution around, is the code correct? Is this path going to take the little boy around the blue blocks or on the blue blocks around to the little house? So even when you're doing simple coding, you're actually getting them to be thinking critically and getting them to be solving problems. What about getting them to think analytically? If you present realistic and relevant situations, get learners to apply their knowledge and their skills. Look for real world scenarios. Help the learners to see the value and the purpose of really thinking about their thinking, of analytical reasoning, and to stimulate their curiosity and their creativity. Perhaps it's a situation like you can see the medical doctors, or perhaps it's an historical event and getting them to look at the pictures and analyze it and discuss it. Or perhaps it's interpreting a poem or a piece of writing and saying what's right, what's wrong, does it work, and answering the questions. So for example, if you're a math teacher, using the data from sports and finance or even their health to illustrate concepts and formulas. And you can do this even with your littlies when you're doing graphs and charts and keeping a log of information. So getting the children to be aware of that. If you're a history teacher, using primary sources and maps and timelines and getting them to analyze the different historical events and looking at it from different points of view, not just one person's, but maybe from both or different sides, depending on how many situations or characters or countries are involved in the illustration. Or if you're a literature teacher, looking at current events or social issues or personal experiences and relating those to themes and characters and getting the children to think about that. So really, even little children, you can start saying and getting them to look at things analytically, comparing things and saying, do you agree with this or this, and why? And get them to ask the questions why, just as we do with tiny little children who start saying why. You want to do that for your children. Get them really thinking, and then get them to start asking questions around these more complex analytical thinking tasks. So getting them really to think. And now my slides decided, there we go. And now we want to really think about, so how do we actually get the children to be thinking? How do we begin to ask the right questions? So our lower order thinking levels are your knowledge and recall and information. So things like, tell me a list, repeat something in your own words, reproduce or make it again, or explain something, or can you recall or remember? But it also goes up into explaining the idea or the concept, or classifying information, or recognizing it or reporting on it. And then your application also goes into both comprehension and application. So in application for middle order thinking, you're now using the information in a different or a new way. So how would you use it? Demonstrate how you would use it. Illustrate it in your own point of view, and showing that they have an understanding of what they've learned. And then your higher order thinking levels are analysis, synthesis, and evaluation from a Bloom's taxonomy point of view. So analysis is where they distinguish between different aspects or parts, so that they compare and contrast, or examine, or experiment, or question, or criticize, or test. Synthesis is where they justify their point or their decision. So they appraise it, they argue it, they find information to support it. And then evaluation is where they're now creating their own ideas and viewpoints, where they're taking the information and they're saying, okay, so we've made something, does it work well? Evaluating their designs, or evaluating what they've written, or formulating a new idea from what they've evaluated. So being critical and really reflecting on what they've done. So getting learners to ask questions, to encourage learners to think critically. So we really need to create critical thinkers. And if we look at the two taxonomies, you will see that Bloom's taxonomy was developed in 1956. And those look at knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Whereas Anderson is looking at remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And that was re-established in 2001. So we need to teach critical thinking. We need to work effectively with technological and artificial intelligences that we see developing in the world around us, that we really want our children to be critical thinkers. I feel this more and more as I see the technology developing. We need to get our children to think and to question and not just accept. So we need to encourage and facilitate questions and discuss it by using open-ended prompts or scaffolded techniques to get our children to really think about the questions. We need to think about feedback strategies to get the children involved within the space. You could use something like the Socratic method of asking and answering questions to stimulate critical thinking and dialogue within your children. But really think about how you could incorporate not just middle order and lower order thinking, but how do you really get into higher order thinking, even in the foundation phase? Really encourage your children to ask questions. What about critical thinking and reasoning? Well, what about doing something like a time capsule? So a time capsule is if your learners have read a book or learned about a historical character, and then what you do is you might get them to list items that are important about that character, and then put those main characters into a place that maybe they then design their own characters to ask the question. So a technology that I really have liked or beginning to like a lot is a technology called Humi. Humi is an AI tool that belongs to another tool called Hello History. So Hello History has hundreds of chatbots like this that have made from historical characters. But in Humi, you set up your class space. And what your children could then do, you would tell the chatbot that these are only grade 1 children, or these are grade 3 children. Pitch the question or the answer levels at their levels. And then your children can take their questions and put it inside of the Humi classroom space that you've created for them to use. It's a really interesting way to use technology and get them to perhaps having a discussion with a historical figure that's passed. So they could interview the chatbot and explain and justify their responses, and they could express how they've drawn the conclusions that they've got from the answers that they've got from the bots. So just think about using technology also to get the children to be thinking. You could do the same tool with no technology and get them to act out the things about the character, and then get the other children to actually talk about what the character is and whether they agree with how the child's interpreted it. But this is just one way that you could get them to explore. So really think about how they are making decisions and getting them to reason with what they found out. Perhaps another fun activity could be this. I love Kim's game. I remember playing it as a child from being really, really small. And I did it with my foundation phase classes and even high school classes in terms of building long-term memory and encouraging them to remember and all sorts of other things, but a great one also for reasoning. So placing a whole lot of items onto a tray or onto a book or onto something that's a surface that is a space where they know this is what you've got to look at, and then getting them to look at it for 3 to 5 minutes, not long, and remembering then what is on that tray. And then what you would do is you would cover all of the items that they can't see it, and they would then have to write down the list of what they saw. And then you compare those lists and check the answers and see how many. The interesting thing is when you play these games, when you do it regularly in class, the number of items they remember in the same amount of time grows over time as you begin to teach them how to do it. So teaching them to reason and remember and to pull out information could be in a fun activity as well. And then what about getting them to think about how they evaluate what they've done? So testing and evaluating their prototypes. Did their product meet the brief that they wanted it to? Did it move the way they wanted it to? And was it moving effectively for them? Do the electronic components work and solve the problem? What would you improve is something really important that children find very difficult to answer. They don't want to think about, oh, I've got to fix this. Oh, it doesn't work. But if you've got them testing the product, if it's rolling straight or if it's not moving well, or if the motor's not running or the lights are not coming on, and they realize that it's not coming from a place of criticism, but rather a place of getting it to meet the brief and to solve the problem, that they realize that it's not a criticism and it's not a bad thing. And getting them to look at what can be improved and giving them time to improve it really builds their perseverance, really gets them to see how they can get things done and builds their confidence in the long term. It doesn't have to be done in a way that belittles them at all, because if everybody's in the same space and everybody knows they've got to look at their things really critically and see what could be improved, almost everybody's things always need something to be improved. And so if they realize that that's the process they're going to go through, it isn't seen as a hardship. But when they get it right and it works the way they want, the excitement is really wonderful to see. So explaining how they would improve it is just as important then for them to do. What about getting them to play some really fun games? So if you look at this, I wish I was in front of you and you had these coins, but you don't. So if you took coins and you built this pyramid, so 1 at the top, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and I say to you, you are only allowed to move 3 coins to flip this triangle upside down, what would you need to do? Think about it and see if you can pop the answer into the chat. Ah, thanks, Abigail. That's really cool that you looked at the code and you fixed it. Thanks. Thanks for all these comments. Move top 3 to the bottom. Nice. Thanks to those of you who are playing. So if you're moving the coins, you take the top one, like somebody said, and you move it right to the bottom, and you take the 2 end ones and you move those to the second row so that you now end up with your upside down one. So you can see here, you've taken the top one, so that's moved down, and you move these ones up to which was originally the second row, so then that becomes your top row. Playing these kinds of games with children can be really, really rewarding, and there are hundreds of them. If you also go and look at matchstick games are also a really great one to have with your children. I had a box of coins with a range of these that the children could play, and I had a whole lot of matchstick activities with boxes of matches, not matches that had been struck, actually matches that were dead, but that were put into containers that they could take a little container of matches and some match problem-solving cards, and the children could go and play them when they'd finished an activity. It gets the children interested in other ways of thinking. It gets the children involved in the lessons. It also encourages them that when they finish work, they're not just getting another worksheet, but they can actually go and do something which is getting them to think differently, and it's almost relaxing from that point of view. So if we're now thinking about our thinking, we really want to encourage communication, collaboration, creativity, and perseverance. And so if we then think about how we do that within terms of critical thinking, so getting the children to remember, to understand, to apply, to analyze, to evaluate, and to create. And think about too, in terms of how we want our children to think logically. So we want them to reason. We want them to be able to make generalized judgments. We want them to be able to draw conclusions. And we want them to gather information, explore evidence, and make decisions. So we really want to develop our 21st century skills in our learners, developing critical thinking and logical thinking. And we want to empower our children really to succeed. We want to show them that they can do it and build their confidence. And in building their perseverance, we will be building their confidence as well. If we now think about logical and critical thinking things, what about doing things like checking facts accurately and information? So teaching them to really be critical thinkers, making sense of information, analyzing it, comparing it, contrasting it, making inferences, highlighting the higher order thinking skills, for me is something that we really need to be teaching. If we see what's happening online with social media and how people just forward things when they haven't fact-checked them, is something that we need to overemphasize at school. Because in the vast majority of cases, our children are online for much more time than they should be. Many children are being made aware of technologies and apps and websites that they shouldn't even be aware of in terms of their age. And so teaching them to be critical, teaching them to be logical becomes even more important in spaces like this. So let's have a look at this one. Do you think this is fake news? Yes or no? Please pop it in the chat. Do you think this is fake news? Got one answer. Anybody else? Is this fake news? Okay. Anybody else? So now we've got a yes and a no. Has anybody Googled it while we are talking? Yes. True. Not fake. Okay, so I'm going to contrast, changing my slides here again. So let's get back to the presentation. So for me, it's teaching children that if you see something that you're not sure about, even if it's a donut made sandwich, that they should verify it. So you could do activities like this, where you could then hop into Google with them if they're little children, and you could say, okay, let's see what we can find. Well, this is what I found. So KFC was testing fried chicken, a fried chicken sandwich. So this was in September 2019, and they were doing it in a range of places. So I wondered, this is people.com. So I thought, okay, so if this is people.com, is this real? So I carried on searching. So then I found a CNN article that said KFC is testing some kind of chicken donut sandwich. And I thought, oh, so there's more than one. And then I found a US week or a US weekly, which said a similar thing. And I thought, oh, well, then this must be true. We found it in 3 different places, 2 of which are news magazines. And that's what we need to do, is we need to go in and verify information. We then need to look at it from a logical point of view and a critical point of view. You could have the discussion about, would you eat this? Do you think it would be nice? There were a whole lot of pictures and things that also came up with the search. So yes, Kentucky was testing this. But for me, it's having the discussion, having the communication, teaching the children how to verify it, if we really want them to be logical and critical thinkers, not just taking things from the viewpoint of yes or no without actually looking at it. Then look at this one. So from the Ed blog, it said that 50% of the world's oxygen is produced by the sea. So do you think this is accurate? Yes or no? I do want to say thank you to everybody who's participating and popping in messages. To the rest of you, I would love to see you participating as well. So what do you think? Does the ocean make 50% of the oxygen? Thanks for the input. Thanks for all the answers, everyone. I really enjoy your engagement. Thank you. So again, check and verify, Google it. Perhaps add a word like research to something like this, that it's not just an article, but this is now scientific knowledge. So if you add something like research, then you start getting research articles or information about it. So these are 2 sources I found. This one is from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So it's .gov, so that means it's American. And they say that scientists estimate that roughly half of the ocean, half of the oxygen production on Earth comes from the ocean. And so it talks about the production is from oceanic plankton, a really interesting kind of viewpoint. Another one was from the Oceanographic Institute for Woods Hole. And here they talk about, does the ocean produce oxygen? Said we know that more than half of the planet's oxygen comes from the ocean, not the entire ocean, just the top 200 meters or so. And it carried on to explain. And I've added the references in here. And I think it's doing the same thing. Whenever we've got a topic, we should almost get the children to verify it. And then we could take social media posts and get them to verify it. And so get the children to just start thinking like that. Because even though the children are young, many of them are on things like TikTok or particularly, and some of them are on Instagram, and not all the information is accurate. So teaching them, how do we find out where the information is accurate? And then having a discussion around it. So here you're really telling your children to think logically and then to draw conclusions and make decisions. So thinking critically as well. So think about activities like this that you could be adding into your lessons, not even as a whole activity. It could be part of an introduction or part of a conclusion, or if you're talking about some content that you're teaching about, they could quickly verify whether something is true or not, and you could show them areas where it's being justified. So I want to now just talk about why it's so important to teach logical and critical thinking. George Land, in the 1960s, did a study on creativity. And what he did was he did an assessment with children that started off who were 5 years old. And these children hadn't really gone into the schooling space then. And their children came back with results of their creativity being 98%, according to the test that he did. He then ran that exact same test with those same children when they were 10 years old. This was a very longitudinal study. And their creativity had dropped down to 30%. What had happened to these kids? They had gone into school. He then took those same children and did the same test with 15-year-olds, and it had then dropped down to 12. He then did the same test, but he doubled his number of students. So now looking at 280,000 adults. They were early 20s when he did this study, and the creativity had dropped all the way down to 2%. And so what I want to say to you today is that in your classroom, you control the key to creativity. You control the key to developing critical thinking. You control the key to developing the children's logical thinking. How are you making your lessons so that you're encouraging the creativity, that you're inspiring children to ask questions, that you're getting them to think logically about it in a safe space so that they will persevere and that they will feel comfortable within that space? Georges Lander's conclusion wrote, "We have concluded that non-creative behavior is learned." For me, that's really scary. But the other exciting part is, if the non-creative behavior has been learned because of the system, we can unteach it. And so let's unteach this behavior. Let's really think about how we teach differently so that we can really inspire our children to be critical and creative thinkers. Picasso said, "All children are born artists. The problem is to remain an artist as we grow up." So think about that. How are you encouraging this? How are you encouraging the creative thinking? How are you encouraging the children to want to do what they want to do in terms of creativity? And then for me, one of the people I really loved a lot was Ken Robinson. If you've never watched his 2006 TED Talk on "Do Schools Kill Creativity?", go and watch it. It's really inspirational and really relevant still today. And in that little talk, he talks about we have to rethink the fundamental principles on which we're educating our children. Think about what your classroom looks like. Is it still a teacher-centered space? Or is it really a learner space where children can really be thinking critically, where children can actually question what you are saying, where children are encouraged to think logically, to come up with solutions, come up with their own ideas? For me, it's often really difficult in a classroom, but think about doing it step by step, little things that you can change to really get your children to be logical and critical thinkers, to really inspire the creativity. So a logical thinker is a learner who's encouraged to explore, to analyze information, and to plan how the problem will be solved effectively, and to record the results that they've done. Your critical thinker is your child who asks questions, who explores and researches information, who analyzes the information, who draws conclusions and makes decisions. So think about how you can be doing this in your lessons and really getting your children to think. Have fun developing logical and critical thinkers in your classrooms, not just in coding and robotics, but in everything you teach. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I hope everyone enjoyed this session today. Critical and logical thinking may seem to be new in the coding and robotics curriculum, but it's really not new. A new concept, as you've learned today. It's been around for quite some time. It's only now, I think, been actually particularly mentioned as one of the skills that needs to be explored during a specific subject, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So I'm hoping that everybody enjoyed the session. Karen, which is the next one that we're having? We're having another webinar.
AR.
Yes,
It's
that's a
AI next week.
workshop. Next week. Yeah. So if anybody's interested in artificial intelligence in the classroom, please do join us for that session. Drop me an email if you want to attend that session. I will send you if you want to actually, because it's generic, it's for all subjects in all of the schools. So if you want to attend that session or you want to enroll quite a number of staff members, we do have a bulk booking system. That works very well, especially if you want to enroll more than one person at a time, then it's not an individual payment thing. But yeah, so, please
And then
drop us a
the
line.
high level competencies, is that a webinar or workshop?
I think that's a workshop also.
So that's
I
also
think
in
that's also a
March.
workshop. That's also in
That's
March, yeah. Yeah. So high level competencies and the AI things that you need to look forward to. And then, yeah, so the recording for this session, we will be uploading this recording onto our YouTube channel very soon, along with the other one that Karen presented about a month ago. So please also look out on our YouTube channel. You will also find a lot of other MTC free webinars that we've had in the past are all loaded onto the Macmillan YouTube channel. So please hop on there and go and have a look and see what is available. So thank you again, everybody. And please look out for an email from Salome with your certificate. And then we'll see you either next week or the next one you want to attend. Thank you very, very much.